You're listening to My Inner Teacher with Peter Sterios and Crystal Ariel. The answers you seek are within you.
Barnaby, it's a pleasure to meet you. I have recently been to London, and I love the fact that our mutual friend Jonathan at Home Wellness recommended you. And I don't even want to, I want you to introduce yourself. And of course, I'm personally curious about this transformation that happened in your life, because
there's been lots of transformations along the way in my life.
I bet.
And I started off life as a sort of commodity trader and derivatives trader, and ended up having hedge funds and all sorts of different things, and then decided it became no fun anymore. It was so much fun. I'd get up every morning and I'd go and play a game of four-dimensional Monopoly. And so it was great fun. It was really good fun. And then when it stopped being fun, I just lost the urge to do it. And yet I thought, I've still got a lot of experience. I've still got a lot to offer. What am I going to do instead? And so I've been coaching and helping people with various issues, and coaching companies, and acting as a therapist for individuals for quite some time now. Since that all ended in sort of 2010, so the last 16 years or so. And, life is extraordinary. The ups and downs of life, I think, are always there to just somehow teach us something and lead us somewhere deeper. And, I've had a lot of ups and downs that have taught me to go deeper and deeper and deeper. There's never been a time when things have been going swimmingly that I've thought, no, I need to dredge up some stuff from the past. It's always been in at times of challenge, and I don't think of them as bad times. I just think of them as challenging times that have really pushed me to do something different. And that's going back many years to when I was a teenager, and I knew that I needed to do something different because my life was pretty crazy, and I ended up, doing some Tai Chi was my first sort of foray into sort of meditation.
How old were you then?
17, I guess, 17 or so. It was interesting because they used to do some meditation at the beginning, at the end of class, and that was the bit that I really liked doing. And we ended up setting up a meditation group, some of the people that were in this Tai Chi group.
At 17?
At 17, I set up a meditation group and was meditating. And it seemed to be the thing that was really alluring to me. It was the thing that was really captivating my attention, was what happened when I went inside and slowed down a bit. I started sort of navigating this inner world rather than the outer world. And, it sort of progressed, and I'm still doing that stuff.
Into becoming a trader and chasing the dream.
It was almost, I wanted to prove to the world, I think, as a young man, I really wanted to prove to the world that I was somehow okay, and I was able to compete and win. And I'd been fiercely competitive rugby player, and anything that I did, I wanted to win at. So when I started getting involved in the commodities world, it really sort of played into that, and I could sort of win and have a measurable success. But what I really liked was the actual excitement of it more than the money, in a funny sort of way. The money was great, but it was the excitement of winning and proving myself to be a success that was really the most important thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Out of our deepest wounds comes our deepest gold,
Always.
And I just want to get right to it. Did you have a near-death experience?
I did, but that was much more recently than back in those days. I had a near-death experience coming up nearly a year ago. So it was August last year, August the 2nd last year. I was on holiday in Ibiza with my wife and a friend and my sister-in-law, and I'd driven to this car park in Ibiza and was parking the car. We were going out for dinner, and suddenly I didn't feel well and I died. My heart stopped. It was no pain beforehand, no symptoms, and I just literally was dead almost instantaneously. And I had what they call a widowmaker, cardiac arrest. It was, for other people around me, it was really scary. What was absolutely extraordinary is that as I was parking the car, so there were two other cars that were being parked at the same time, both of whom were emergency room doctors. And they got out of the car and started performing CPR on me. And I don't remember any of this at all. I mean, I was gone. And, so I had, my angels were certainly in evidence that day, and they performed CPR on me for 13 minutes until ambulance got there and with the defibrillators and all the rest of it, and whisked me after an hour or so working on me because I kept arresting even when they got me back. I ended up in a hospital and had some stents fitted to an artery or two in my heart, and everything seems to be, touch wood, everything seems to be okay. But it was an extraordinary experience for those people around me, and it was an extraordinary experience for me too. While they were, pretty freaked out, I had one of the nicest experiences of my whole life. I was in a comfortable, to say I was comfortable is an understatement. It was the most comfortable I've ever felt in my life. There was this really sort of bright but soft primrose light, and I had time with my higher power and was talking to her, and it felt so easy. It felt so lovely. It wasn't like any other comfort that I've ever felt. The temperature was perfect. My body felt so warm and easy. I didn't have any self-consciousness or any hold back of who I was at that moment. It was though I was almost a different person, and I felt blissfully happy. But it was, I said, do I need to go back? And she said, yes, Barnaby, I think you do. And so I said, oh, really? I didn't really want to. I was very happy to be there. I really got a sense that this was my last time round, that I didn't need to come back again, that I was done and going off to somewhere very much more comfortable to stay, and not have to go through that whole rebirth piece again somehow and be really, I was at the end, and I was really okay with that.
Yeah.
And then it was suggested, I asked, should I go back? And she said, yeah, and I had to go back somehow. And the next thing I remember is waking up in hospital in a whole bunch of pain and didn't really want to be there at that point. And so it was an interesting time, cracked ribs and sternum and stuff from the CPR was not very nice, but the experience was really good. And it's odd because I've been still processing, what did it mean and why am I back and what have I got to do? There seems to be a responsibility. Having been there and then come back, I've still got something important to do. And that feels quite nice and quite a responsibility somewhere that's not always evident what it is that I need to do. And so I spend time every day asking, what's the next right thing for me to do?
That's good.
And and that's all I can do. And all my, for the last 30, 40 years, I've been promoting that sort of stuff, and to spend time relaxing and actually getting in touch with that voice inside. And, it's very powerful, it's very moving sometimes to just not know what the next right thing to do is, and to sit down and somehow it comes. Somehow, get up, take the dogs for a walk. It can be really. It's not. You need to save the planet or anything grandiose at all, ever. It's far more practical. Do the next right thing. Do the next right thing. And so I try to do the next right. And along the way, hopefully, I've always somehow been very interested in mentoring or coaching or helping other people. And I guess I have an experience of life, not just this experience, but just lots of different experience of life that helps me sort of not be. I'm rarely shocked by anything that anybody does or says or anything else. That I'm just very happy being part of somebody else's journey somehow, and I help them see what their intuition, their voice says is the next right thing. I don't have the answers for them. I barely have the answers for me. So who am I to have the answers for anybody else? Yes, I have some ways of asking questions that help people discover that stuff in themselves, but I think that we all have such innate wisdom for ourselves that it's not about me telling somebody what they need to do. It's about them discovering it. So here I am.
It's a beautiful testimony, really. This calling, whatever you want to label, this inner desire to do something different. This podcast is an expression of that for me in a way. It's happened without me ever in the wildest dreams thought I would be having a podcast. And here I am now with, I think Crystal was saying this morning that we're 35 episodes or so into this process, and these stories that we're listening to, like yours, are so incredibly fascinating. And it's very, from my seat looking out at this unfolding, it's really a beautiful community that is showing up, including Jonathan, to be honest. Like Jonathan is one of those unique individuals in my life who I only see about every 5 or 10 years. And yet we can just have lunch together, like I was sharing. And it's just like we haven't missed a beat. I think your ability to be conscious through that process of what you just described is incredible. It's a beautiful thing to hear about it. It's another thing. I've had 3 near-death experiences in my life.
For real?
Have you really? Wow.
I didn't know that.
All with drowning.
Tell me about yours.
Well, I'll tell you about one because it was the first one and the most frightening one. I was, like yourself, a rugby player, competitive. I was driven to win. I didn't like losing. The rugby team that I was playing on in Santa Fe, New Mexico was good enough to like win. And so there was that, maybe what you're getting as a trader. I was feeling like, wow, this is amazing. Some of the guys on the team, one of them was a U.S. Olympic kayaker, and he was always going out. The Rio Grande River is just one little drive away from where we were living. And I wanted to learn how to kayak. And so I took his course, which was in a swimming pool at a high school where the water is still and clear and easy. And I was one of the best at all the drills we were going through. And so even before the course was over, him and his best friend, also a kayaker, said, "Hey, we're going kayaking this weekend. You want to go?" And I go, "Yeah, you think I'm ready?" And they go, "Yeah, you're ready." So I go with these, and it's in March in northern New Mexico. It's still winter, and the water is icy cold. So I've got wetsuit, shorty wetsuit on, then I've got Patagonia polyester pile, sweatpants, track pants. I'm bundled. And the kayak that I used in class wasn't available that day, and he had an extra one. And so my legs were too long, so we had to kind of jam the foot pegs as far forward. So I'm kind of stuck in this boat. We get into the river. I'll get to the good part. We get into the river, and they just immediately assume that I've got experience in moving water, which I had never had and no coaching on. And they just turn up the eddy current and go upriver to practice some rolling and things, get warmed up for this class 4 rapid that they're about to take me down. And so I just try to follow them, but I had so much adrenaline. My first paddle off the beach, I went too far and I went into the current downstream, and they're already halfway, 50 meters up the river waiting for me to catch up. And I'm heading down towards a little 4-foot waterfall. And I don't know what I was thinking. I kept trying to paddle upstream, but I wasn't going back to the eddy. I was going into more of the current, and that made it worse. I get to this waterfall and I flip, and I'm upside down now in the water. And luckily I had a helmet on. My head is hitting these rocks. I'm getting disoriented. One of the paddle goes flying away. Unbeknownst to me, this spray skirt on the boat pulled away from the boat. So my boat's filling up with water. My pants are swelling because they're pile and they're soaking wet, and I can't eject. So I'm stuck in this kayak. And that's when I'm realizing this is dire. And I panicked. And the only thing that I could do was put my hands above my head and slap the the exposed hull of the boat that was upside down. And my head's getting knocked, and I'm just slapping, thinking, oh, someone save me, Amazingly, the Olympic kayaker realized what was happening, paddled down. And this whole thing is taking about a minute so far. And I'm underwater for about 35, 40 seconds. And I've been doing yoga, so I had some lung, but the anxiety was burning oxygen, and I could tell that I was getting near the end. In class 4 rapid, he's able to position the nose of his boat under one of my slapping hands. And I grabbed the tip of his kayak with as much adrenaline-fueled muscle power that I had, enough to pull my head above water and get a breath. And once I had a breath, then the anxiety. And it was one of those things where I was confronting my last breath for at least 25 to 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Where the oxygen level, my throat was so contracted trying to keep water out of my lungs. Like I was sore for weeks. But he got me to the shore, and I was in shock. It was cold. I was hypothermic.
Yeah.
But you said it.
I had a similar experience, whitewater rafting and getting caught underneath.
So after that experience, though, it was so clear. It's so clear to me that it wasn't my time. It wasn't, there was something that I still had to do. And to this day, I use that memory as this reminder, in a way, of how precious our time is here. And the things that I've done in my life, they're all great, but I still feel there's more that I'm meant to do. And I'm sure you feel the same.
Pressure is so precious, life, and yet so fragile.
Hey, quick note. Peter's Inner Teacher Academy is launching soon. If this is resonating with you, head over to innerteacheracademy.com and grab a spot on the waitlist. These trainings are intimate and space is limited. So if you want to be first in line, tap the link in the description below and sign up.
You can also see details about my 2025 retreats at some incredible locations around the world, like Iceland, Austria, California, and New Zealand. Attendance at these trainings will count towards in-person hours for the Inner Teacher Academy. And now let's get back to the magic.
And what keeps it all together for me to continue to live is just pure grace. There's so much grace in my life and always has been.
Yeah.
And recognizing that I'm so fortunate. It's extraordinary, the scrapes and things that I've been through, things like that, it's amazing.
The name of my book is Gravity and Grace. And
wow. Okay.
so this idea of grace has evolved for me over the last 25 years. And to me, it's as real as gravity. You know how and gravity is one of these invisible forces that we accept from childhood, learning how to walk. We understand what gravity is, but it's hidden. It's mysterious. Where's the source, etc. And grace is similar. It's just the attraction, instead of physical attraction of bodies, it's more of a non-physical or kind of spiritual connection of bodies. And if it's a divine body that you align to, like a god, or if it's more inward, like an intuitive seat within yourself, something divine within yourself or in nature. Everyone has a different path, maybe different access to that level of intelligence. But for me, grace is as real as gravity. It's hidden, but it's a natural state of our existence. And how do we prepare to receive grace? And it's in the silence. It's in the void.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And there's something, I think that we meet people along the way in our lives that can help us experience some of that quietness within. And they really have a profound impact on the rest of your life, because the moment that you recognize that there's something else, I'm not just flesh, blood, and thunder. I'm there's something else, and recognizing that piece in ourselves, or recognizing that piece in me, was a major turning point and changed the rest of my life and changed the trajectory of the rest of my life.
Of course. I want to comment really quickly on what you said, though. These people that come along in our lives. So here's this guy in a boat on the river that day with me, who does the impossible in a class 4 rapid of putting a tip of a boat under a slapping hand, and the water's like this. While during the pandemic, my family and I lived in New Zealand. And so during my time in New Zealand, I had a dream about him, and I hadn't spoken to him in 20 years, and I didn't even know how to find him. He wasn't online, kind of like you, just no presence online. So I was in Santa Fe teaching, and I found a friend of a friend, and he gave me the guy's phone number. And I call him up, and he's totally different. He was a friend, but not a close friend. But he's like changed his life completely, lives in New York. And I said, do you remember that day on the river in Santa Fe? And he says, yeah, I do. And I said, I never really took the time to thank you for saving my life. And he goes, what are you talking about? He didn't even remember. He remembers us going kayaking. He didn't remember that he saved my life.
Wow.
His name was Mac. I said, Mac, on that day you saved my life. That day changed my life forever. And I haven't thanked you, and I'm thanking you now. And he goes, well, thanks, Peter. It was just another day for him.
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, I remember when I met my meditation teacher, it was 1987. So I was 25, 26. And I remember being in there was a big auditorium with lots of people there, 3,000 people there. And I was sat there, and I was almost embarrassed that the guru was talking to me and not anybody else. My ego was so big that I thought that she was addressing me the whole time, But everything that was said was so poignant for me in my life that it was just extraordinary. And I had an experience of the whole world just stopping and becoming quiet. And I had sort of a communion with myself in a way that I'd never experienced before. And that moment, that just changed my life forever. It's just amazing. And it's sort of gone on to one thing after another. I did a training, some men's work back in the 90s. And I remember we did something that we look at the little boy in us, the deepest need that we had. And it was just heartbreaking to me. And at the same time, I saw what it would be like in the world if everybody was getting that need met. And there was just this picture in my mind of all these kites being flown. And I really got a sense that that these kites were people's souls, and that they were allowing their souls to fly. And I created a mission for myself that day. You know, it was all about purpose and mission this weekend. And my mission was and still is to help souls fly by reaching out to mankind. And I somehow figure that this is part of that, you know, and I still refer back to that mission it was in October 93. So that was, you know, 32 years ago, and it's still as fresh for me today as it was 32 years ago, you know. And I think that when you have those moments of clarity of what you could or should do, fueled by that inner, you call it the inner teacher, but fueled by that sense in myself, my intuition, that's everlasting. That doesn't leave you ever.
Right.
And it continues to be something that I can rest on and somehow take guidance from today. Is that in line with my mission? Is that in line with helping souls fly by reaching out to mankind? Yeah. And that's what that's the piece that I want to do today, not the derivatives trading or that financial chicanery that we were involved with at the time, which was great fun, but there was no real soul. There was no real purpose to it. It was just about enjoying myself. It was very willful. It was just all about me enjoying my day. And I hope that my days aren't quite so self-centered today, you know?
Yeah, I don't think they are. I'm curious, was the men's work that you did involved with Mankind Project?
Yes, it was.
Same.
I was the first certified leader outside of the US.
Yeah, I had a similar experience about the same time after a divorce. And just...
Where did you go through your weekend?
Here in California, in Santa Cruz, in the foothills of Santa Cruz Mountains on the coast. And the whole initiation weekend was, you know, for men.
Probably know lots of the guys you went.
Oh, I'm sure. Even to this day, especially the younger men, I don't find this orientation for men to explore these inner realms much. You know, it's not, there's still a pretty stereotypical idea of what masculine means.
I think there's a whole bunch more awareness of it than there was.
Yeah.
You know, when we were doing, you know, when we were first doing the work, it was really cutting edge and new and whatever. And now men turn up at the weekends having done a lot of work already on themselves.
That's encouraging.
And that was a real sort of roller coaster. That was, you know, hang on, you know, here we go. We're off, and we don't know where we're going to.
As life should be, right?
That's right. You know, and I remember having done my weekend, I sat in the sunlight and just was in awe of the sort of community and the closeness that I saw amongst these men, and thought, I need that in England, and I want it for me in England. And so I committed to taking lots of people back to the US, and I did. And, you know,
that's fantastic.
We built a community here, and it's still going, still really strong here. I'm not so involved anymore, but I still love it dearly.
Same. Crystal, so this probably surprises you a little bit, you know, like men talking about circles and stuff, but having the fact that we just talked to Lolly Stirk about her early days in London of circling. Do you have questions for two men who circle?
No, I very much enjoy whenever I hear it, because it's usually the women's circles that are highlighted, you know, and it's, I guess, more common. So when I hear about men's circles, I find that to be very comforting, because I think that men need that. Women need that because they can share in their experiences. And I mean, at least And I know in the US, like a lot of the men I talk to, there's this camaraderie around like sports or money or business, but the depth, it doesn't get very deep. And that's what's needed to create these bonds that usually men will have with one person. That one person that they allow to see the real or, the deeper parts of them. But I think, we've talked about this before. I think it's good for women to be balanced, have that feminine and masculine energy. And I think it's important for men to be balanced, having that feminine and masculine energy. And the feminine side is connection, like that union coming together and opening up and being vulnerable. And so I love listening in on
Yeah.
Men talking.
I love the archetypes that we used on the weekend as a way to explore your inner world and to sort of make sense. And that balance that you're talking about, Crystal, I think is vital. Looking where I'm strong and looking where I'm less strong, and looking at what's in the way of me getting more balanced is absolutely priceless, I think.
Yeah. And like with my own husband, because we went on a retreat where this beautiful thing happened where women were able to tell the men things that they experienced so that the men would understand how life is for them. And then vice versa, the men had a chance to tell the women how life is for them. And so I really try to create that space, knowing that a lot of men have this pressure to provide and this pressure to have it all together and this pressure to, so I often tell him, like, you're not alone. I'm here. I'm with you. We're together. It's not just you and you're doing it all. And, because that's a lot of weight for any human being to carry.
Absolutely. And I think it's pretty much hardwired in men too. It's not just sort of society and expectations. It's actually, at a deeper level, it's sort of it's cellular, that we're there to protect and provide, and it's very strong, that in men. And I think that it's exciting when we realize and we explore that journey with other men. I mean, I did my group, which was the groups that we did post the weekend, where we do really deep process work for, sometimes twice a week for many, many years. It made a huge difference to how I showed up in the world. It makes a huge difference to how I view other people. I'm not quite so ready to judge them and think that I'm different I'm so similar to every other body in the world, and I'm unique, but I'm so similar. That's the piece that I think that I got from doing that more than anything else, was to recognize that I'm just another bozo on the bus. I'm not so different. And I always felt so unique, or terminally unique, unfortunately. But it's really good to just take a breath and realize that other people have gone through what we're going through too. A very close teacher, friend, sort of mentor of mine always talks about, mountaineering and rock climbing, and how years ago when men were trying to climb the Eiger, that they'd have to camp out on the face of it, and it would take a couple of days for them to get up all the way. And now, because they know the route and they know where to go, they can do it in a few hours, and I think that sort of metaphor for life, and having other people that have been there before you is really what I try and do. I try and help people to go where I've been. I'm not telling them to go somewhere I haven't been myself. And so a lot of the coaching that I do is around deep process work and trying to connect with that part of ourselves that we hide, repress, or deny. And so to look at the shadow, look at the things that we're trying to avoid. And I think that my clients seem to like it, so I'm going to continue.
I feel the exact same thing with what I teach in yoga, that I have discovered a way of using this old technology, body technology, in a very unique way that's kind of counterculture to the modern expression of what yoga is. And it's been influenced by all the work that I've done, including men's circles.
Absolutely.
And I'm just, it's a calling, as I can see the same in you. And it's nice to know, like, there's a community out there that is, a lot of it is remote. And thank God for this kind of technology where we can have this kind of conversation. It's nice to know that, Barnaby, that you exist, you know, like it really is right here for me.
Yeah. No, it's extraordinary. I mean, even though the pandemic was awful, in some ways, the increased use of Zoom made the world very small, and made life, it's easy for me to chat to people in California. It's easy for me to be communicating with people in Sydney and whatever. I know the technology was there. I used the technology beforehand, but it was really for sort of therapeutic or coaching. It really took on a new level, and I think it's great. I think it works. I work with a group that have got 2 similar programs running, and the results, and it's around some addiction stuff, but the results are very similar online or face to face. And I think that there's some pluses and there's some minuses. You don't get the connection, you don't get the hugs, you don't get to feel the vibration of somebody else's beingness right next to you. But equally, you're in your own space doing the work. You're not having to go elsewhere. It's not that you're traveling to it. You're bringing the work into your life. And I think that there's something really valuable about being able to do that too. So I think a mix is perfect.
Yeah, I really like that you bring that up. I like that you bring up the benefits of doing it online, because there is a focus of, that in person is better. But what you just said is so critical, so important, because a lot of people have trouble integrating everything that they learn back into their daily life. But if they're learning all of these things intertwined with their daily life, it's easier.
I also have had this experience more recently, say in the last 6 months, where just hearing you talk right now, I feel that energy of your passion in my own body. And we can't hug each other, but psychically, exactly. I feel it in my toes right now, like there's this flow of bonding, this connection psychically. And I would have never imagined that was even possible. And now I'm starting to kind of, what's exciting about my job here is I get to do this 4 times today. Like
wow.
We've already done 2. You're the second, and we've got 2 more this afternoon. It's just wow. We're just feeling through pixels. Amazing.
And it's amazing that it works. It's extraordinary that it works. And it shows me that, connection is about heart to heart, and that has nothing to do with time or space or
That's right.
anything.
Do you know the Heart Math Institute in Santa Cruz? So it's this, kind of Silicon Valley refugees that kind of burnt out. And the stories that I've heard, it was just a group of people that were really starting to notice the coherence between mind and heart, and seeing all the benefits of these, mindfulness practices and things like that. And so they've created all these. You can go on their website, heartmathinstitute.com or something like that, where they have all these tools, technological tools. And one of the studies, which I found fascinating, was they took a bunch of U.S. soldiers. It was funded by the Department of Defense in the U.S. The Pentagon is this huge building, football fields wide and long, etc. They put a group of soldiers in one room watching war battle scenes, video of war, and their platoon members, these men that had connection in battle. Another group of them was off in another room, just sitting in a room by themselves, and they were all hooked up to monitors. They could find coherence between the emotional states of the ones that were viewing the film and the ones that were in a room not witnessing anything, but their markers were moving in synchronization. So there is that kind of quantum level of connection that it's a mystery how it works.
Absolutely.
And it's grace, you know.
And it's for good and for bad. It can be, trauma can be transmitted from person to person, but so can grace, so can that feeling of being uplifted, and that's more infectious, I think, in a way than anything else. And recovery is infectious, just as some of the darker aspects of life. And I think that I'm committed to helping in the lighter side of life rather than the dark side. And
Same.
And I try my best. I do what I do, and I really enjoy it, and I really enjoy working with people, to see what they can discover about themselves. I don't think that we can ever help somebody tell them where to go, but we can definitely help them find their own way to go.
So this logo that we use for the Inner Teacher Academy is a labyrinth. And I knew about labyrinths, but I didn't really understand what they were. Like I knew that they existed, but I didn't know the history and tradition of them. And the more I get to know about them, the more I realize that it's really a perfect metaphor for what you and I and Crystal are talking about here. That you can't take that first step towards the center. That only can come from the individual. But once you take that step towards the center, that's the only decision you have to make. And then it just winds you, the chaos of life winds you around, and you eventually end up in the center. And then in the center, there's stillness. There's container to hold you. But then you have to exit. You have to return. And you go through life returning back out to where you began, changed. And that's this process. For me, this inner teacher process is just making that choice to listen to an inner authority when you're in a crossroads, when you're in a point where you need to make a decision. And sometimes the answer doesn't come right away. Sometimes you have to be patient and you have to cultivate more stillness before that becomes clear. Yeah. Fantastic.
It's like what Barnaby was saying about just do the next right thing. Just take the next step. And by the way, I'm super, I went through a phase where I was obsessed with near-death experiences. I watched 30 videos of people describing what they saw. And a lot of them came back with deep depression because, they felt all this bliss and now they're here. But I love that you came back with this feeling of I have a responsibility and I have a purpose and I don't need to know. I can just let it unfold.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Thank you for listening to me, because it still touches me when I think about it. I could well up and cry just thinking about how sweet it was, and yet I don't know what it means. I'm trying to put my sort of, I've got lots of ideas of little snippets of what it means, but trying to articulate the lesson or the meaning of that is, I think it's impossible, because I think the whole deal is that stillness, and is that comfort, and is the sort of certainty that things are okay. Even at that point, things were more than okay. They were fantastic.
And you were dying. You were dead.
And I was dead. And it was fantastic. And it was fantastic. It was interesting. A friend of mine died fairly recently, and my thoughts were not for her. I was almost envious of her in a funny sort of way that she'd passed and she'd gone. But my thoughts were for her husband who was left, that he didn't know that, maybe. He didn't have quite the same understanding. And I know that she did, but it's interesting. It's changed my perspective of death and dying, that's for sure. I have no issue with my own mortality right now. Maybe I will do again in the future, who knows? But at the moment, it seems to be quite a nice alternative in a funny sort of way. I'm not hankering after dying at all, but I am quite looking forward to it in a funny sort of way, because I know that it's going to be pretty damn good, and that's an extraordinary place to be.
It
And if
sure
that's
is.
our biggest fear as humans, then what have we got to lose?
Well, yeah, indeed.
You were saying something earlier about, you're content with just having this, I'm paraphrasing, the content of having this stillness, which is in a way similar to my situation. But then this publisher showed up and said, would you write a book about gravity and grace, And so it kind of forced me into finding language to describe how I came to this understanding for myself. And through my story, hopefully the people that read it will find that for themselves in whatever path they're on. And I don't know if you've ever considered writing a book, Barnaby, but I feel this, I don't know, there's just something that's coming across pretty strong to me.
People have suggested it.
Maybe there's a seed for not anyone else's purpose, but your own. Because that's what I discovered at the end of finishing my book is I wrote it. I'm glad I wrote it. And luckily the publisher had an editor, a freelance editor to come in and clean it up for me and make it more readable. I refer to my own book a lot, because it's a concise 200-page book that has the essence of what my experiences have been to get me into this place in my life. And it's a lot of material to digest and to maintain.
Yeah, maybe I maybe one day, who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. Well, it's been such a pleasure.
Lovely to meet you properly.
Same.
And you too, Crystal. Thank
Yeah.
you for organizing this.
That's it for this episode. Be well and stay open to the teacher within. If you've enjoyed our time together, follow or subscribe and stay tuned for upcoming chats you don't want to miss.